Carl Jung discovered that everything you hate about others is actually hiding inside you. This wasn't just a theory. It was a brutal personal revelation that destroyed his most important relationship and changed psychology forever. In 1912, Carl Jung was Sigmund Freud's golden boy, the chosen successor, the future of psychoanalysis. But something was eating at Jung. Every time he looked at his mentor, he felt disgust. Freud's obsession with sex, his need to be worshipped, his authoritarian control over every idea. Jung began attacking everything he hated about Freud, in letters, in lectures, in public debates. He called Freud narrow-minded, power-hungry, and intellectually rigid. But here's what Jung didn't realize at the time. He was looking in a mirror. The traits he despised most in Freud were the exact traits hiding in his own shadow, his own need for control, his own obsessions, his own hunger for intellectual worship. This discovery would become Jung's most important insight about human psychology. We don't hate people for who they are. We hate them for who we are. The shadow is the part of yourself you refuse to see. The angry, jealous, petty, controlling person you pretend doesn't exist. But here's the dark truth Jung uncovered: that hidden self controls more of your life than you think. Every time someone irritates you, triggers you, or makes your blood boil, they're showing you a piece of your shadow. The rude coworker who interrupts meetings, they're reflecting your own need to be heard. The selfish friend who makes everything about them, they're mirroring your own hidden narcissism. Jung called this projection. You project your shadow onto others because it's easier to hate them than to face yourself. But Jung discovered something even more powerful. When you finally face your shadow, you don't just stop being triggered by others. You unlock parts of yourself you never knew existed. The anger you've been projecting, it becomes passion. The selfishness you've been denying, it becomes healthy boundaries. The darkness you've been running from, it becomes your greatest source of power. In the next 20 minutes, I'm going to reveal Jung's 3 shadow discoveries that will completely change how you see yourself and others. Not just what happened between Jung and Freud, but how to use their psychological breakthrough to transform your own life. By the end, you'll understand why Jung wrote, "Everyone carries a shadow, and the less it is embodied in the individual's conscious life, the blacker and denser it is." So let me ask you, what if the person who annoys you most is actually your greatest teacher? What if everything you hate about them is pointing to something you need to heal in yourself? The dark truth about your hidden self is waiting. Are you ready to face it? Before Jung discovered the shadow, he had to live it, and his relationship with Freud became the perfect laboratory for the most painful psychological experiment of his life. Picture this: 1907. Jung is a young psychiatrist who idolizes Freud. He sees Freud as the brilliant father of psychology, the man who unlocked the secrets of the human mind. Jung travels to Vienna to meet his hero. At first, it's perfect. Freud embraces Jung like a son. Jung feels chosen, special, destined for greatness. But slowly, something starts to change. Jung begins noticing things about Freud that irritate him. Freud's need to control every conversation, his obsession with being right, his inability to admit mistakes. Jung starts criticizing Freud in private, then in letters, then in public. Freud is too rigid, Jung complains. He thinks his way is the only way. He can't handle being challenged. But here's what Jung didn't realize. He was describing himself. Jung was just as controlling as Freud, just as obsessed with being right, just as unable to admit mistakes. But he couldn't see it. His shadow was invisible to him. This is Jung's first shadow discovery. What you hate most about others is what you hate most about yourself. Your shadow contains all the traits you've decided are unacceptable, the parts of your personality you've pushed away, denied, or labeled as not me. But those traits don't disappear. They hide in your unconscious mind, waiting to be projected onto others. Think about the last person who really annoyed you. What specifically bothered you about them? Were they arrogant, selfish, controlling, fake? Now here's the uncomfortable question. Could those same traits exist in you? Jung discovered this the hard way. Every criticism he made of Freud was actually a criticism of himself. Freud became his shadow mirror, reflecting back all the parts of Jung he refused to own. Let me give you a modern example. Sarah works in marketing. She has a coworker named David who always takes credit for other people's ideas. Sarah can't stand him. "He's so selfish," she complains. "He never gives anyone else recognition." But when Sarah honestly examines her own behavior, she realizes something uncomfortable. She also takes credit when things go well. She also forgets to mention her teammates' contributions. She also wants recognition and praise. David isn't just annoying Sarah. He's showing her a part of herself she doesn't want to see. This is how the shadow mirror works. The traits that trigger you most in others are usually the traits you're most afraid to own in yourself. Jung's relationship with Freud became toxic because neither man could see their own shadow. They kept projecting their denied traits onto each other, creating an endless cycle of criticism and conflict. The breakthrough came when Jung finally asked himself, "What if everything I hate about Freud exists in me too?" That question changed everything, not just for Jung, but for psychology itself. Because Jung realized that shadow work isn't about fixing other people. It's about reclaiming the parts of yourself you've been giving away. When you hate someone for being controlling, you're giving away your own power to set boundaries. When you despise someone for being selfish, you're denying your own needs and desires. The shadow mirror shows you exactly what you need to integrate to become whole. Jung eventually reconciled with the fact that he was just as obsessed with power as Freud, just as controlling, just as hungry for recognition. But instead of fighting these traits, he learned to own them. And that's when his real work began. Here's Jung's shadow mirror technique. The next time someone really irritates you, ask yourself 3 questions. What specific trait bothers me about this person? How might this same trait exist in me? What would happen if I owned this trait instead of denying it? This isn't about blame or shame, it's about reclaiming your power. But Jung's second discovery goes even deeper, because it's not enough to see your shadow, you have to integrate it. Jung's second shadow discovery nearly broke him, because seeing your shadow is one thing, accepting it is something else entirely. After Jung realized he was projecting his own traits onto Freud, he faced a devastating choice. He could keep pretending he was different from his mentor, or he could admit that everything he criticized about Freud lived inside him too. This is what Jung called shadow integration, the process of owning the parts of yourself you've been rejecting. But integration isn't easy. Your ego fights it every step of the way. Jung discovered this during what he called his confrontation with the unconscious. After his break with Freud, Jung spent years analyzing his own dreams, fantasies, and psychological patterns. What he found terrified him. He wasn't just the wise, spiritual psychologist he wanted to be. He was also petty, jealous, angry, and power-hungry. He had the same flaws he'd spent years criticizing in others. But here's Jung's breakthrough insight. These shadow traits weren't just weaknesses to overcome. They were sources of power to reclaim. Jung realized that his need for control, when integrated properly, became his ability to lead and innovate. His hunger for recognition became his drive to make meaningful contributions. His anger became his passion for truth. This is Jung's second shadow discovery. Your greatest weaknesses, when integrated, become your greatest strengths. Your shadow contains not just your denied flaws, but your denied gifts. Let me show you how this works with a practical example. Meet Marcus, a software developer who can't stand his teammate Lisa. Every time Lisa speaks up in meetings, Marcus feels irritated. She's so attention-seeking, Marcus thinks, always trying to be the center of attention. Using Jung's shadow mirror, Marcus asks himself, how am I attention-seeking? At first, Marcus resists. I'm not like that. I'm quiet. I stay in the background. But when Marcus digs deeper, he realizes something uncomfortable. He does want attention. He wants his ideas to be heard. He wants recognition for his work. But he's been suppressing these desires because he labeled them as bad. This is where shadow integration begins. Instead of judging his need for attention, Marcus starts owning it. Yes, I want recognition. Yes, I want my voice to be heard, and that's okay. When Marcus integrates this shadow trait, something powerful happens. He starts speaking up in meetings. He shares his ideas more confidently. He stops resenting Lisa and starts learning from her boldness. Marcus discovers that his attention-seeking shadow, when integrated, becomes leadership. Jung experienced the same transformation. The traits he'd criticized in Freud became the foundation of his own psychological innovations. His need for control became his ability to structure new therapeutic methods. His intellectual hunger became his drive to explore uncharted territories of the mind. His desire for recognition became his motivation to develop theories that would outlast his lifetime. But shadow integration requires a specific technique. Jung developed what I call the integration practice. Here's how it works. First, identify the shadow trait. Name the quality you've been denying or projecting onto others. Second, find the gift within it. Ask yourself, how could this trait serve me if I owned it consciously? Third, practice conscious expression. Look for healthy ways to express this trait in your daily life. Let's try another example. Sarah from earlier realized she was projecting her own need for recognition onto David. Using Jung's integration practice, she identified the shadow trait, wanting credit and recognition. She found the gift. Her desire for recognition was actually her drive for excellence and impact. She practiced conscious expression. Instead of hiding her contributions, she started speaking up about her work in appropriate ways. Sarah discovered that owning her need for recognition made her more confident and effective, not more selfish. This is the power of shadow integration. You stop wasting energy fighting parts of yourself, and you start using that energy to become whole. But Jung's third discovery reveals why this process is so transformative. Jung's third shadow discovery changed everything he thought he knew about human potential. Because when you fully integrate your shadow, you don't just heal your psychological wounds. You unlock a level of personal power you never knew existed. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are by embracing all parts of yourself, light and dark. After years of shadow work, Jung noticed something remarkable. He wasn't just less triggered by others. He was more creative, more confident, and more capable than ever before. The energy he'd been using to suppress his shadow was now available for growth. The traits he'd been fighting were now working for him instead of against him. This is Jung's third shadow discovery. When you integrate your shadow, you don't lose your dark traits. You transform them into conscious power. Jung realized that the shadow contains not just your denied flaws, but your denied potential. All the qualities you've labeled as bad or unacceptable are actually raw power waiting to be refined. Let me show you how this works with a real example. Meet Elena, a graphic designer who struggles with a coworker named James. James is extremely competitive, always trying to outdo everyone else's work. He's so aggressive, Elena complains. Everything is a competition with him. Using Jung's shadow mirror, Elena asks herself, how am I competitive and aggressive? Elena's first reaction is denial. I'm not competitive. I'm collaborative. I support my teammates. But when Elena digs deeper, she finds her hidden competitiveness. She does compare her work to others. She does want to be the best. She does feel threatened when someone else gets praise. The difference is that Elena has been suppressing these feelings, while James expresses them openly. This is where Jung's power transformation begins. Instead of judging her competitive nature, Elena starts integrating it consciously. She realizes that competition, when channeled properly, becomes excellence. Aggression, when directed appropriately, becomes assertiveness. Elena begins setting higher standards for her work. She starts advocating for her ideas more forcefully. She channels her competitive energy into creating better designs. The result? Elena's work improves dramatically. She becomes more confident in presentations. She starts getting recognition for her innovative ideas. Elena discovers that her aggressive shadow, when transformed, becomes unstoppable creative drive. Jung experienced this same transformation with his own shadow traits. His need for control became his ability to pioneer new therapeutic techniques. His intellectual arrogance became his confidence to challenge established psychology. His hunger for power became his capacity to influence generations of thinkers. But here's the key insight. Jung didn't eliminate these traits. He refined them. Your shadow doesn't need to be destroyed. It needs to be transformed. Think about it this way. Anger, when suppressed, becomes resentment. But anger, when integrated, becomes passion for justice. Selfishness, when denied, becomes passive aggression. But selfishness, when owned, becomes healthy self-care. The dark traits you've been fighting are actually misplaced virtues. They're powerful forces that have been expressing themselves in unconscious, destructive ways because you haven't learned to direct them consciously. Jung developed what I call the power transformation technique. Here's how it works. First, identify your shadow's raw power. What energy or drive is behind the trait you've been rejecting? Second, find the conscious expression. How can this energy serve you and others when directed appropriately? Third, practice refined expression. Look for ways to channel this shadow energy into productive, conscious action. Let's apply this to another example. Tom realizes he's been projecting his judgmental nature onto his critical boss. Using Jung's technique, he identifies the raw power, his ability to see flaws and problems. He finds the conscious expression. This same ability makes him excellent at quality control and problem solving. He practices refined expression. Instead of judging others silently, he becomes the person who helps identify and fix issues before they become major problems. Tom transforms his judgmental shadow into valuable professional insight. This is why Jung called shadow work the key to individuation. You're not just healing old wounds, you're reclaiming the full spectrum of your psychological power. But the real magic happens when you realize that everyone who triggers you is actually offering you a gift. Jung's relationship with Freud taught him something that revolutionized psychology. Every person who triggers you is actually delivering a message from your unconscious mind about what you need to become whole. Years after their bitter split, Jung made a startling realization. Freud hadn't been his enemy. Freud had been his teacher. Every trait that had irritated Jung about his mentor was pointing to something Jung needed to develop in himself. Freud's authoritarian style had forced Jung to discover his own authority. Freud's rigid thinking had pushed Jung to develop his own flexible approach. Freud's hunger for recognition had awakened Jung's own ambition to make lasting contributions. This is Jung's final shadow insight. The people who trigger you most are actually your greatest gifts in disguise. Your unconscious mind uses other people as mirrors to show you exactly what you need to integrate to become your full self. But most people miss this gift because they're too busy being angry. Let me show you how this works in everyday life. Meet Rachel, a project manager who can't stand her micromanaging boss, Stephen. Stephen checks on her work constantly, questions her decisions, and never seems to trust her judgment. "He's so controlling," Rachel complains. "He doesn't trust anyone to do their job." Rachel spends months feeling frustrated and resentful. She considers quitting. She complains to friends. She fantasizes about telling Stephen exactly what she thinks of his management style. But then Rachel learns about Jung's shadow work. She starts asking different questions. Instead of, "Why is Stephen so annoying?" she asks, "What is Stephen trying to teach me?" Using Jung's gift recognition technique, Rachel realizes something surprising. Stephen's micromanaging isn't just about control. It's about attention to detail, thorough planning, and taking responsibility for outcomes. These are exactly the qualities Rachel has been avoiding in her own work. She's been so focused on big-picture thinking that she's neglected the details. She's been so eager to delegate that she's avoided taking full responsibility. Stephen's controlling behavior is actually showing Rachel what she needs to develop: more thorough oversight of her own projects. When Rachel integrates this insight, everything changes. She starts paying closer attention to details. She begins checking her team's work more carefully. She takes greater responsibility for project outcomes. The result? Rachel's projects improve dramatically. Her team's performance increases. And surprisingly, Stephen starts trusting her more because she's demonstrating the very qualities he values. Rachel discovers that Stephen wasn't her problem. He was her solution. His annoying traits were pointing to her own undeveloped potential. This is how Jung's gift recognition works. Every shadow projection contains a hidden message about your growth edge. The person who triggers your anger is showing you where you need to develop more passion. The person who irritates you with their selfishness is pointing to where you need better boundaries. The person who annoys you with their attention-seeking is revealing your own need for recognition and expression. Jung realized this with Freud. Every criticism he'd made of his mentor was actually a roadmap for his own development. Freud's intellectual rigidity had pushed Jung to become more flexible. Freud's need for disciples had inspired Jung to become more independent. Freud's focus on sexuality had motivated Jung to explore the spiritual dimensions of psychology. Without Freud, Jung would never have become Jung. Here's Jung's gift recognition practice. The next time someone really triggers you, instead of focusing on how annoying they are, ask yourself 3 questions. What quality in this person irritates me most? How might developing this same quality serve my growth? What would happen if I saw this person as a teacher instead of a problem? This practice transforms your entire relationship with difficult people. They stop being obstacles and start being opportunities. Let's try one more example. David realizes he's been projecting his own need for attention onto his colleague Maria. Using gift recognition, he asks, "What is Maria's attention-seeking trying to teach me?" He realizes that Maria's confidence in speaking up is exactly what he needs to develop. Her ability to claim space in meetings is what he's been avoiding. When David starts practicing these same qualities consciously, his career takes off. Maria stops being his irritation and becomes his inspiration. This is the ultimate power of Jung's shadow work. You transform your triggers into teachers, your enemies into allies, and your projections into self-knowledge. But now comes the most important question. How do you put all of this together to transform your hidden self? So here we are. You now understand Carl Jung's 3 shadow discoveries that changed psychology forever. The mirror discovery. Everything you hate about others is actually hiding inside you. The integration challenge. Your greatest weaknesses, when owned, become your greatest strengths. The gift recognition. Every person who triggers you is teaching you something you need to learn. But here's the question Jung himself faced after his breakthrough with Freud. How do you actually live this knowledge? How do you transform the dark truth about your hidden self into conscious power? Jung discovered that shadow work isn't a one-time event. It's a lifelong practice of turning triggers into growth opportunities. Remember the opening question. What if everything you hate about others is actually hiding inside you? Now you know the answer. It is. But that's not a problem to solve. It's a gift to unwrap. Every person who irritates you is holding up a mirror to show you the next part of yourself that's ready to be integrated. Every shadow trait you've been rejecting contains power you're ready to reclaim. Think about Jung and Freud. Their conflict wasn't a failure. It was Jung's unconscious mind forcing him to become independent. Freud's authoritarian style was exactly what Jung needed to encounter to develop his own authority. The same thing is happening in your life right now. That difficult coworker, that critical family member, that annoying friend, they're all serving your individuation process, whether they know it or not. But here's what Jung learned from his shadow work. You have to choose to see it this way. Your unconscious mind will keep sending you the same lessons through different people until you integrate what you need to learn. How many times have you found yourself in similar conflicts with different people? How often have you changed jobs, relationships, or social circles only to encounter the same types of personalities that trigger you? That's not bad luck. That's your psyche trying to complete your development. Jung called this the process of individuation, becoming the person you were meant to be by integrating all the parts of yourself you've been rejecting. The controlling part of you that you've been denying, it becomes your ability to create structure and lead others. The selfish part you've been suppressing, it becomes your capacity for healthy boundaries and self-care. The angry part you've been hiding, it becomes your passion for justice and positive change. But this transformation requires conscious participation. You have to choose to see your triggers as teachers instead of threats. Here's Jung's complete shadow integration practice. First, use the mirror technique. When someone triggers you, ask, what trait in this person am I rejecting in myself? Second, apply the integration challenge. Ask, how could this trait serve me if I owned it consciously? Third, practice gift recognition. Ask, what is this person trying to teach me about my own development? This isn't about becoming the same as people you dislike. It's about reclaiming the energy you've been spending on rejection and using it for growth. Jung spent years developing this practice after his break with Freud. He discovered that every person who had ever triggered him was actually pointing to an undeveloped part of his own potential. His critical patience taught him to develop his own discernment. His competitive colleagues pushed him to refine his own theories. His difficult relationships forced him to integrate his own capacity for love and boundaries. By the end of his life, Jung rarely felt triggered by anyone, not because he'd eliminated his shadow, but because he'd learned to see every difficult person as a gift from his unconscious mind. This is the ultimate goal of shadow work, psychological freedom, the freedom to respond to life from your whole self instead of reacting from your wounds. The dark truth about your hidden self isn't something to fear, it's something to embrace, because your shadow contains not just your denied flaws, but your unrealized potential. So the next time someone really gets under your skin, pause and ask yourself, what is my shadow trying to teach me through this person? Your hidden self is ready to become your integrated self. Jung showed us the way. Now it's your turn to walk the path. Thank you for watching. If you're ready to continue this journey into the depths of human psychology, subscribe and check out my video on Fyodor Dostoevsky's Dark Psychology: Truth Revealed in Crime and Punishment, where I reveal how intelligent people destroy themselves through twisted logic and how to recognize these psychological traps before they consume you. See you in the next dimension.